The first time Olivia saw the house, it looked more abandoned than lived in. She had been driving through a quiet back road in northern Maine, the kind of place where the trees grow so thick they feel like a wall pressing in on both sides. Her phone had lost service miles back, and the GPS had given up before that. It was late in the afternoon, with a pale sun fighting through heavy gray clouds, and she had pulled over to stretch her legs. The house sat at the end of a narrow gravel path, half hidden by overgrown weeds. Its wooden siding had faded to a sickly gray, the windows either dark or shuttered, and the roof sagged slightly in the middle like a tired old man. Yet, despite its condition, something about it seemed watchful, as if it knew she had stopped to look at it. She told herself it was just curiosity that made her walk closer. Maybe it had once been a boarding house or a family's summer retreat left to rot in the woods. She noted how silent everything was. No birds, no breeze, not even the hum of distant traffic. The quiet pressed into her ears until she could hear the faint crunch of her own shoes on the gravel. A shiver ran up her spine, though the air wasn't particularly cold. When she reached the front gate, a rusted iron arch nearly swallowed by vines, she stopped. The gate was open, hanging loosely on its hinges, and beyond it the path wound up to a porch that sagged under the weight of moss. She hadn't meant to come this far, but there she was, staring up at the house as if waiting for it to notice her that a sound came from inside. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable, a soft creak like footsteps on an old staircase. Olivia froze. It was impossible, she thought. No one could be living here. But the sound came again, a groan of wood under shifting weight. She peered through the shadowy windows but saw nothing except the warped reflection of herself standing in the fading light. A logical voice in her head whispered, an animal, maybe, a raccoon or a fox. Yet her chest tightened, and she felt the prickle of being watched from behind the glass. She pulled her jacket tighter and glanced back at her car, half hidden by the curve of the road. Going back suddenly seemed very wise, but the strangest thing happened when she turned to leave. From the corner of her eye, she saw the front door move. Just slightly, enough that she knew it hadn't been the wind. The door had opened an inch, the darkness inside yawning wider. Her pulse skipped, and her throat went dry. She didn't move, didn't breathe, until the door eased back into place as though nothing had disturbed it at all. Olivia stood there, gripping the straps of her bag, trying to decide if she had imagined the entire thing. But when she glanced down at the gate again, her heart stuttered. The iron gate, which had been sagging open when she arrived, was now shut. She backed away slowly, refusing to turn her back on the house. Step by step, she made her way to her car, fumbling for her keys with trembling fingers. Her eyes never left the porch, the dark windows, the silent door. By the time she got behind the wheel and locked it, her breathing had quickened into short, sharp gasps. The house sat in the dimming light, unchanged, silent, as if mocking her fear. She told herself again and again that she had only imagined the movement, the sound, the gate. But when she finally drove off, gravel spitting from her tires, she couldn't shake the image of the house watching her retreat. And even stranger, she swore she saw the faint flicker of a light come on in an upstairs window as she rounded the bend and lost sight of it. The rain outside the pavilion hadn't slowed. If anything, it grew heavier, drumming harder against the tin roof, a rhythm that seemed to merge with the soldier's words. Matthew leaned back against the bench, his hands pressed flat against his knees, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he continued. When we realized Morales was missing, we assumed he'd gotten turned around in the dark. It wasn't impossible. Storms can disorient you, and the woods have a way of swallowing landmarks. But Morales wasn't a rookie. He knew those trails as well as anyone. We combed the perimeter until dawn, but there was nothing. No broken branches. No drag marks. No sound of struggle. Just nothing. That emptiness does something to you. He described how the next night, they doubled their watch shifts. No one wanted to admit it, but the unease was contagious. Soldiers don't like mysteries. They're trained to find causes, strategies, enemy intent. But this was different. We'd hear it again, Matthew said, lowering his voice, footsteps moving just beyond the tree line. Too light to be a bear. Too quick to be human. He mimicked the pattern. 3 steps, a pause, then 2 more. Never closer, never farther. Always at the same distance, like something was deliberately staying just out of sight. He admitted that a couple of the younger men joked about ghosts in the woods, but he didn't laugh when he told us. He stared out into the rain like the sound was replaying in his head that on the third night, he drew patrol duty with another soldier named Keegan. The storm was brutal, wind snapping branches above them, rain plastering their uniforms to their skin. They had to shout just to hear one another. At one point, their flashlight beams crossed over something strange, shallow depressions in the mud, not quite footprints, but too symmetrical to be random. The water was filling them fast, erasing detail, but Matthew swore they didn't look like boots or shoes. If I didn't know better, he said, I'd say they looked like hands. Open hands pressed into the earth. His eyes flickered toward us, as if to gauge whether we believed him. None of us spoke. The discovery rattled them, but Keegan, young, brash, unwilling to admit fear, pressed forward. He wanted to track whatever made the marks. Matthew followed reluctantly, sweeping the light across trunks and brush until the forest seemed alive with movement. Then, through the sheets of rain, they both saw it. A figure crouched low at the base of a tree. Too far to make out clearly, too quick to hold the light steady. It shifted, fast, almost spider-like, before vanishing behind the trunk. By the time they reached the spot, there was nothing. Just mud, water, and a fresh gust of wind that carried with it the faintest trace of a whistle. That was the first time I thought maybe Morales hadn't gotten lost, Matthew said, his voice quiet enough to force us closer. The pavilion was dead silent now, no one scrolling phones or whispering jokes. The storm outside seemed to rage harder, as if punctuating his last words. He rubbed his palms against his knees, his gaze hard and unblinking. That was the night I realized something out there was watching us. And it wasn't leaving. Matthew sat forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice steady but low, like he was afraid of being overheard even now. After Keegan and I saw that thing by the tree, the others didn't believe us. Soldiers don't like to admit fear, and if there's no proof, no tracks, no signs, it becomes easier to call it nerves or imagination. But we knew what we saw. Keegan didn't joke about it again. He got quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me. Matthew's eyes shifted toward the rain beyond the pavilion. The storm outside hammered on, trapping us inside his memory as much as our shelter. He told us how over the next few nights, the noises multiplied. Not just footsteps this time, but whispers carried through the storm. The rain makes sound strange, diffused, directionless. At first, he thought it was wind rattling through the branches, but then the voices sharpened. They didn't speak English. They didn't speak any language he recognized. They were layered, overlapping, like a chorus whispering too quickly to understand. Every man in the unit admitted to hearing it at some point, though none of them ever confessed to being the first to bring it up. There's a shame in acknowledging things you can't fight, Matthew muttered. We'd rather face an army than silence we can't explain. One evening, the whispers came so loud that men abandoned their bunks and gathered in the command tent. Radios crackled with static, shorting out in the storm, and when the whispers broke through, they seemed to bleed into the signals. Voices not carried by air, but by electricity itself. Some swore they heard Morales's voice threaded among them, begging for help. Others said they heard their own names spoken back to them, stretched and distorted like someone was pulling their syllables apart. Matthew admitted he heard his own name that night, drawn out in a hiss. Matthew, he said, shuddering. Once you hear your own name come back to you like that, you stop thinking it's the storm. Things escalated when Keegan disappeared. It was almost the same as Morales. He went out on a short patrol in the rain and never came back. No signs of struggle, no prints left in the mud. Matthew was paired with him, but they split routes for efficiency. I swear to you, he told us. I only lost sight of him for 5 minutes. 5. Then his radio went dead. When he retraced the path, there was only one sign left behind. A single boot, half sunk in the mud, laces undone as if it had been pulled off in a hurry. No blood, no tracks leading away. Just the boot, and the storm to swallow any answer. Matthew's gaze lingered on us each in turn, heavy with unspoken weight. 2 men gone. No explanation. And I knew, deep down, the rain wasn't hiding the thing out there. The rain was feeding it. His words dropped like stones into the silence that followed, and for a moment, the pavilion seemed colder, as though his memory had seeped into our bones. None of us dared laugh now. The storm outside answered with a violent crack of thunder, echoing through the empty park. Now, the pavilion felt like a vault. Nobody shifted, nobody scrolled their phone, nobody even cleared their throat. The storm had pressed itself against us, the sound of rain on tin like static filling our ears, and Matthew's voice cut through it like a knife. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tight the veins stood out. After Keegan was taken, he said, "Command decided to pull us out. Too many men disappearing without a trace, and none of us were fit for combat anymore. We weren't sleeping. We weren't eating. We were just waiting." His eyes flicked up, and for a moment he looked less like a storyteller and more like a man back in that place, reliving it. The evacuation order came on the fifth night. A transport was supposed to meet them at the edge of the training grounds at dawn. Until then, they had to hold position. But the thing out there, it knew. "I swear it did," Matthew said. That night, the whispers grew unbearable, louder than the rain, seeping into the barracks, weaving through the static on the radios, even curling into their dreams. Some men woke screaming, convinced something had been breathing against their faces. Others swore they saw shadows pressing against the thin canvas walls, stretching long, distorted shapes that vanished when flashlights hit them. And then, in the dead middle of the storm, it came. Matthew was on watch when he saw movement at the tree line. He raised his light and caught the glint of eyes, too many eyes, reflecting back at him like shards of glass. The figure stepped forward, half shrouded in rain. "It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen," he whispered. Tall, but twisted, like it had grown wrong. Limbs bent, spine curved, hands too wide, too flat. It moved like it was learning how to walk by copying us, but getting it wrong. He trailed off, staring at the ground, and for a long moment the only sound was the rain. The men panicked. Some opened fire into the storm, muzzle flashes lighting up sheets of rain, but the thing didn't fall. It scattered, blurred, splitting into shapes that darted in and out of the light. One man screamed that it was right behind them. Another fired blindly into the trees, and then the whispers rose into a shriek, louder than the thunder. Matthew grabbed his gear and ran. He didn't look back until he reached the dirt road, the rain hammering down so hard he could barely breathe. Behind him, the gunfire cut short, leaving only silence. And the silence was worse that BY morning. The transport found only Matthew. No other men, no other gear. Just empty barracks, mud trampled flat by rain, and the faint imprint of open hands pressed into the ground, leading back into the trees. Matthew's voice caught as he finished. "They told me I was lucky, that I survived. But the truth is, I don't think anyone survives that thing. Not really. It's still out there, waiting for storms like this one." His words lingered in the air, heavy and bitter, until even the rain seemed quieter. The pavilion sat in silence after Matthew's story, the rain filling the space where no one dared speak. A few people avoided his gaze. Others stared out into the dark, scanning the sheets of falling water as if they might catch a glimpse of bent limbs between the trees. Finally, someone cleared their throat. It was a woman sitting near the far post, her hood drawn low over her brow, rainwater dripping steadily off the fabric. She wasn't part of our usual group. No one had noticed her arrive. She spoke softly at first, her voice nearly drowned by the downpour. "I know what it's like," she said, "to be followed in the rain. Mine wasn't in the woods, though. It was on the highway. That got our attention." She straightened a little, pushing back the hood, and for the first time we saw her face, drawn, pale, eyes rimmed with dark circles. She looked exhausted in the way only someone haunted could, her gaze fixed on the water dripping from the pavilion roof as she began. "It was 2 years ago. I was driving home from work, late shift, the rain coming down so thick I could barely see past the hood of my car. The highway was empty, just miles of black asphalt and white lines swallowed in water. That's when I saw her." She paused, drawing in a slow breath. A woman, standing on the shoulder, soaked to the bone, her dress clinging to her like paper. At first, I thought she'd been in an accident. She didn't wave me down. She just stood there, watching. Her instinct had been to keep driving, but guilt tugged at her. No one deserved to be stranded alone in weather like that. Against her better judgment, she slowed, pulling to the shoulder a few feet ahead of the figure. The wipers struggled to keep up, slashing back and forth across her view as she leaned over to the passenger side window. She reached to unlock the door. That was when she realized something that turned her blood cold. She wasn't wet like she should have been. Her dress looked soaked, yes, but her skin, her hair, it was dry. Perfectly dry, like the rain wasn't touching her at all. The woman in the pavilion shivered, pulling her hood back up as thunder rolled in the distance. I locked the doors and drove off. Fast. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, she wasn't standing on the shoulder anymore. She was in the back seat. A ripple of unease spread through our group. No one laughed this time. No one tried to call her bluff. She stared at us with hollow eyes, her voice flat as the rain swallowed her last words. And the worst part? I still don't know how I got home that night. The pavilion felt colder after her words. A couple of us shifted closer together, though no one dared speak. The woman's hood shadowed most of her face again, but her eyes glimmered beneath it, fixed on the floorboards as though she was seeing something far away. "You think you'll scream," she said quietly. "You think you'll slam the brakes, get out, do something." But when I saw her in my back seat, I couldn't move. My hands stayed locked on the wheel like they weren't mine anymore. She described how the ride stretched into a kind of waking dream. The rain roared against the car, drowning out all other sound. Yet inside the cabin, there was a suffocating silence. The rearview mirror showed the woman in the back seat, head slightly tilted, eyes too wide, unblinking. The highway rolled on, mile after mile of darkness broken only by the strobing flashes of her hazard lights in the downpour. "I didn't dare look back directly," she whispered. "Something told me if I acknowledged her, if I made her real, she'd never leave." Still, she couldn't ignore the subtle things. The faint scent of damp earth creeping through the vents. The way the back seat seemed heavier, like the suspension had shifted. At one point, her radio fizzed to life, static hissing in and out, and through it, she swore she heard the faint hum of a woman's voice, a low, tuneless melody, almost like a lullaby. She twisted the dial, trying to shut it out, but the song only grew clearer until she ripped the radio knob clean off in panic. Silence fell again, except for the breathing. Not hers. Not steady. Shallow, deliberate breaths behind her ear.by then. She had stopped looking in the mirror, but she could feel the figure leaning forward, closing the space between the seats. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel as she whispered. I started praying. I hadn't prayed in years, but I begged out loud. And that's when I realized I could hear her whispering back. Not to me, but with me. The same words, in the same rhythm, just a second behind my own voice. Like she was copying my prayer as I said it. Her shoulders trembled, and the rain rattled even harder against the roof of the pavilion. She said the last thing she remembered clearly was the exit sign for her hometown flashing past through the storm. After that, everything blurred. No memory of parking, no memory of unlocking her front door. She only knew that when she woke the next morning, her car was in the driveway, engine still running, the interior bone-dry despite the storm that had flooded the streets overnight. But there was one thing left behind, she whispered, her eyes flicking up to meet ours. On the back seat, right where she'd been sitting, there was mud. Fresh, wet mud, like someone had tracked it in from the shoulder of the highway. The woman's voice had dropped so low that we had to lean in, the rain masking her words. I told myself it had to be a dream, she said, that I was exhausted, half asleep, imagining things. But the mud on the seat wasn't a dream. It was there, thick, wet, smelling of moss and rot. She paused, tugging the edge of her sleeve down over her hands. The strange thing was, when I tried to clean it, it wouldn't come up. The more I scrubbed, the more it spread, seeping deeper into the fabric like the seat itself was rotting from the inside out. Days passed, but the mud never dried. She left the car windows open in the sun, even sprinkled baking soda over the stain, but the damp smell only grew stronger. Worse, it clung to her clothes whenever she drove, the scent of earth and stagnant water following her everywhere. People at work started asking if I had mold in my house, she said bitterly. But it wasn't my house. It was her. She never named the figure outright, never called it a ghost, though the weight of her silence gave it a shape all its own. Then the dreams began. She'd wake in the middle of the night convinced she could hear water dripping inside her bedroom. Once, she swore she woke to find muddy footprints trailing across her carpet, bare feet, smaller than hers, leading from the window to the bed. But when she turned on the light, The prints were gone. That's when I stopped sleeping, she said. Because every time I closed my eyes, I could feel someone in the dark room with me, breathing, waiting. One night, after weeks of this, she decided to get rid of the car. She parked it on the edge of town, left the keys in the ignition, and walked away without looking back. The next morning, though, the car was in her driveway. Mud still on the back seat. Engine still idling as though it had never stopped. That's when I knew, she whispered, her eyes wide under the shadow of her hood, that it wasn't about the car anymore. She wasn't attached to the highway or the seat. She was attached to me. The pavilion was silent again, except for the hammering rain. Someone shifted uncomfortably, and the rest of us found ourselves glancing back toward the shadows of the park, half expecting to see a pale figure standing in the downpour. The woman pulled her hood low, turning her face away. I still drive, she added finally. But I never take the highway at night. Not anymore. And I don't look in the rearview mirror unless I have to. The pavilion sat heavy with silence after the hooded woman's words. None of us wanted to glance toward the park road, not with the thought of her pale passenger still clinging to our minds. Finally, a younger man at the far end of the benches exhaled sharply, almost a nervous laugh. "You people are going to make it impossible to walk home tonight," he muttered. His voice was shaky, but the way he sat forward told us he had something of his own to share. His name was Ryan, one of those people who never seemed serious about anything. But his expression was grim now. Stripped of humor, he rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the curtain of rain before he began. "Mine happened at a cabin. My uncle's, up by the lake in Michigan. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway with some friends. Nothing special. We'd fish, grill, hang out. But the thing about the lake is, when storms roll in, you don't have anywhere to go. The nearest gas station is 15 miles down a dirt road, and cell service? Forget it. You're stuck with whatever weather comes." He swallowed hard. That weekend, the storm came and didn't leave. The first day, the rain was almost peaceful. They played cards, joked about ghost stories, and cranked up music loud enough to drown the thunder. But as the hours dragged into night, the storm only intensified. The lake was swallowed in fog, waves smashing against the dock until planks began to crack. The power flickered, then died, leaving only candles to paint the cabin walls in trembling orange light. Ryan leaned forward, his voice tight. That's when we noticed something. Every time the lightning flashed, we saw a figure standing at the edge of the dock. Just standing there. No movement. No sound. At first, they assumed it was a trick of the storm, the way shadows play across water. But as night stretched on, the figure remained, always in the same spot, always facing the cabin. My buddy Chris swore it was a fisherman caught in the rain, waiting it out. But that didn't explain why he never moved. Not an inch. For hours. Ryan's hands trembled slightly as he spoke. And then, around 2 in the morning, when the storm was at its worst, the figure wasn't on the dock anymore. It was closer, standing in the grass just 20 feet from the window. The pavilion seemed to draw tighter around us as Ryan's words hung there. He ran a hand over his face, as if trying to wipe the memory away. The rain was pounding, wind howling. But I swear to you, I could see it clearly. It wasn't a fisherman. It wasn't even human. It was wrong. Too thin, too tall, its arms hanging lower than they should. And when the lightning hit again, it was gone. We searched every inch of the property at dawn, but the grass where it stood, it wasn't wet. Not a drop. Like the rain hadn't touched it at all. Ryan's voice wavered slightly as he continued, his eyes fixed on the slick boards of the pavilion floor, like he didn't want to meet our stares. When we saw it in the grass, that was the moment we all realized we were in trouble. Nobody admitted it out loud, but you could feel it. My buddy Sarah grabbed the poker from the fireplace. Chris found an old hunting knife in the kitchen. We didn't know what we were going to do with them, but it felt better than doing nothing. We tried to shut the curtains, but every flash of lightning made us jump, like it was going to be standing at the window the second we turned around. They didn't sleep. Hours ticked by, the rain hammering on the tin roof of the cabin so loud it felt like nails driving into their skulls. Around 3 a.m., the generator coughed back to life for a few minutes, powering a single lamp. That was when Sarah noticed something near the door, muddy prints on the wooden floorboards. Only they weren't wet like they should have been. The rain outside was torrential, but the prints were bone dry. Dry as dust, Ryan whispered. Like they'd been burned into the wood instead of tracked in. The group panicked, convinced someone had slipped inside while they were distracted. They tore through every room of the cabin, flashlights shaking, checking closets and underbeds. Nothing. But when they returned to the main room, the prints had multiplied, stretching farther across the boards toward the couch where they had all been sitting. It wasn't footsteps walking in, Ryan said, his voice trembling. It was footsteps coming closer to us. Then came the knock. Just once. A single, heavy rap on the front door that made the candles shudder in their jars. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Another knock followed, louder this time, rattling the hinges. Chris screamed, throwing the curtains back to see if anyone was on the porch, but the space was empty, just sheets of rain pouring down. And yet, when the next flash of lightning hit, the figure was back. Not on the dock, not in the yard, but at the edge of the porch, its head bent low, eyes fixed straight into the window. Ryan's hands tightened together as he finished, his voice breaking into a rasp. We left at dawn, packed what we could carry and ran. Didn't matter that the storm was still raging, we couldn't stay another second. When we came back the next weekend with my uncle, the cabin was locked tight. No prints, no damage. But when he opened the door, he froze. Because there on the living room floor, plain as day, were the same dry footprints, burned deeper into the boards, leading straight to the couch where we'd Saturday. Ryan's words trailed off, leaving the rest of us staring at him in silence. The storm outside roared on, thunder rolling long and low, like the world itself was listening. He sat back, his face pale and tight, like even telling the story had taken something out of him. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady hiss of rain against the pavilion roof, dripping down the edges in silver sheets. Then Matthew, the soldier, shifted in his seat. He hadn't spoken since his own tale, but now his voice cut through the storm, flat and certain. It's always the same, he said. The rain hides it, but it also brings it closer. Whatever it is, whatever they are, they wait for storms. That's when they feed. His gaze swept over us, steady and grim. It's no coincidence all of us have stories in the rain. It's the only time they can move among us. The hooded woman didn't look up, her hands clenched tight in her lap. I've wondered the same, she whispered. If storms open something, a door, a passage, or if they're not doors at all, but invitations. Maybe when the sky opens, they just step through. She shuddered, pulling her hood lower, hiding her face. And once they notice you, they don't forget. The storm outside seemed to press harder against the pavilion, the air heavy with static. Some of us exchanged nervous glances. Others stared into the darkness, half expecting shapes to form in the sheets of water. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was recognition. Each story, no matter how different, felt connected now, as if they weren't just coincidences but warnings. As if by telling them, we'd drawn the attention of whatever waited out there in the rain. Finally, lightning split the sky, and for the briefest second the world outside lit up in white fire. A dozen of us turned toward the flash, and in that instant, though no one would admit it later, we all thought we saw the same thing. Figures in the storm. Not one, not two, but many, standing just beyond the edge of the pavilion, watching, waiting. When the darkness returned, the space outside was empty again. Only the rain remained, pounding against the roof, as if trying to get in.